There's another really great feature in HOBOware Pro where you can add graph labels to your plot to clarify specific events that you know happened. And again, once you do that, you save it as what's called a HOBO project file. We should know how to do that by now. So here, this is a pendant temperature and light logger that was deployed in my cubicle for a few days. And so we can see we're measuring temperature and light intensity in lux. We're in degrees, we're in SI units, so degrees C also. And what you see here in the data, again, lux, or the light intensity, is in blue. In the morning, during this period of time in March, for a certain period of time in the morning, the sun shines directly in onto where I sit. So I positioned the logger so it would capture that. So you can see here these spikes in the light intensity, these short-lived spikes are when the sun comes in. These were cloudy days here, or this might have been before I deployed it in that location. But here you can see that there are spikes in that data. If we wanted to see where those occurred, we can click on our crosshairs tool here and click on top of that if we can get right on it and see what time it relates to. 7 a.m., 7:11 a.m. Actually, I'm off. So you can see there's two spikes up to 66,000 lux. And then it calms down as the sun begins to rise higher. So what I want to do is I want to label those so that, and then save it as a project file so somebody can understand it in the future. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the crosshair. So just right click and say remove crosshair. And now I want to add a label to this point here. So I want to use my arrow tool. And there's a couple of different ways of doing it. If we select the series, don't even really have to select the specific series because we can do that in the label configuration. But for sake of this example, I select intensity and then go to edit and add graph label. And this is where we can put that in. There's another way to do that too. If you just if you can highlight that series by clicking on it with your mouse and then right click, you will also get a menu that gives you access to the graph label as well. So here's where we can put in our label, and I'm going to say direct sunlight. Actually, I want to call it morning sunlight. And this is where we can define the behavior. We want to attach it to the series intensity. We could attach it if it was related to temperature. We could attach it to that one if we want to. Location is how we want the label oriented in relation to the plot. So if you were looking at, say, an analog clock dial, northeast would be like 2 o'clock. Southeast would be more like, 4, 5 o'clock. Southwest would be 10 o'clock, 7 o'clock. Northwest would be like 10 o'clock. So it's in relation to the plot as to where you want the location. Now, if there is another plot in the way of a specific location and you specify that, it won't let you do it. It'll just bypass it and it won't apply it. You can choose by default. It says include data value in the label, so it will include the actual value recorded at that time. In this case, the 66,000 lux. You can choose it to be transparent, or you can again just shown over the plot in that location, or you can create a little background with a contrasting text. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to select the blue background here and white text so I can see it. Here's where you can actually make it more or less transparent, so you can see here in this little graphic, you can see how it affects it. Obviously 100% transparency is you won't see it at all. So I want it to be a little bit faded, so let's say 25%. We can also select the font and the font size. I want to make it a little bigger than 9. So I'm going to click on 12 and I'll click done. Now notice it stuck it pretty much arbitrarily down here because this is where my cursor was. So I want to point this to this point up here. So the way you would do that is you would select it or click on it, left click with your mouse, and that highlights the label. Go up to the top of the screen and select your hand tool, and then left click and hold your mouse button and drag it. And now we can see that we have our label attached to that very point, and we can see what that value was. Again, this is oriented northeast. If we said northwest, it would show up in the other location. Let me show you how that works. If we click here and apply it, you'll see it's in that direction. If you have trouble dragging it up to that point, again, your ability to drag these labels into the location that you want is directly in proportion to your system resources that are available, your graphical resources in your computer, and the size of the graph and how many points are in it. And it gets a little complicated to explain. An easier way, perhaps an easier way if you can't drag it to the exact point you want, is to actually apply it at that point by selecting the point before you do your label. So let me show you how to do that. I'm going to delete this label. So just select it, left click on it, and tap the delete key. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on this point using my zoom tool, my little magnifying glass, and let's just drag a little box around there. There's my point, and now go back to my arrow tool, and now you can easily select that point by just left clicking on it, and then right click your mouse, and now there's a menu that appears, and you say add graph label, and this is where now we can put our label in, right, and it'll be associated to that exact point. So we'll do this again. And we'll leave it at northeast. I like my blue background. I like my white. And 12. And click done. And now it's associated with exactly that point there. And now we can click on show graph at full scale. The icon appear at the screen. And now we can see it's associated right with that peak. Other things, if we wanted to change this label here, this is just the serial number. I want to change it to morning light test. And say close that. And now, and again, we can change how these things are displayed. If you want to change the color of the temperature graph, maybe. If you double click on that and say, I want that to be red, so click on there, done. And now my temperature is red, my light intensity is blue, everything's beautiful. Now we can save it as a HOBO project file by saying File, Save Project.